It seems like every day, something stranger and stranger is happening
Yeah.
in the world. You've got quantum chips, right, hinting at the multiverse,
Right.
and those mysterious drones over the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's wild out there.
It's definitely a time of rapid change. We're seeing things that challenge our understanding of the world, that's for sure.
Welcome, everyone, to the Quantum Soul. Today we're going deep on those drone sightings, the ones swarming over New Jersey and other states. People are understandably, curious, a little freaked out.
It's the kind of event that needs us to look at it from all sides.
Yeah.
Just like Carl Jung would done. He wouldn't just jump to aliens or government conspiracies. He'd want the literal facts, but also the psychological impact, the historical context, even the myths we build around such things.
Okay, so Jung wouldn't dismiss the nuts and bolts drone aspect, but he'd say there's more to it than just that.
Exactly. He'd ask, what's really going on here for individuals and for society? Are we seeing our anxieties projected onto these drones? Is there a deeper meaning, symbolically, like a message from our collective unconscious?
It does seem like people are quick to jump to conclusions, whether it's blaming the deep state or claiming it's a UFO cover-up.
That's where respecting the unknown is so important. Jung would caution us against getting swept up in our own biases, what he called our shadow material, those hidden fears and desires that can cloud our judgment, especially when we're dealing with something we don't understand.
Okay, so for those who aren't psychology buffs, could you break down that shadow material idea a bit more?
Think of it as the parts of ourselves we don't like to admit to. Insecurities, anger, maybe even shameful desires. We repress these things, but they can pop up in how we react to events. So someone terrified of government control might instantly see the drones as that, even without proof.
So we've got this mix of physical drones and everyone's psychological baggage getting stirred up by them. No wonder there's so much debate.
Right, and it's a classic example of how external events can mirror our inner world. But let's get back to those explanations people are throwing around. The deep state controlling us through fear is a popular one. What do you make of that?
It's definitely tempting to think there's some shadowy group pulling the strings, especially with how crazy things feel right now.
Right.
But wouldn't the internet have exposed something that big by now?
It's a good point. While Jung was alive before the internet age, he was deeply interested in how power dynamics played out. I think he'd recognize that the internet can both reveal and conceal information. A deep state today would need to be far more subtle than just flying drones around.
What about the idea that this is all a distraction from actual UFOs? There are plenty of people convinced the government is hiding something big.
There's certainly historical precedent for that belief, but if that's the case, are the drones themselves the cover-up, or are they meant to muddy the waters and make any real UFO sightings harder to believe? Disinformation campaigns can be very effective.
It's kind of a scary thought that we're being manipulated into dismissing anything unusual. Of course, there's also the possibility that these are just super advanced drones the government is testing.
Absolutely. We know there are black budget programs working on technology far beyond what's publicly known. Maybe these incidents are just a way to gauge public reaction to something new and strange in the skies.
Which leads us to the big question. How do we figure out what's true in this sea of information? It feels like everyone has an agenda these days.
That's where critical thinking comes in, something Jung would have strongly advocated for. We need to be skeptical not just of what authorities tell us, but also of our own gut reactions.
Right.
What are the verifiable facts? What are our biases?
It's like the internet has broken down the walls of secrecy, but it's also made it easier than ever to spread lies and half-truths. We're in this constant tug-of-war between those who hoard information and those trying to get it out there.
And we're caught in the middle, trying to make sense of it all, which is why that inner compass, that ability to discern for ourselves, is so crucial. We can't rely solely on external authorities anymore.
It's like you were saying earlier about being gaslit as a society. For years, anything outside the mainstream explanation was dismissed as crazy, whether it was remote viewing, near-death experiences, even the idea of psychic abilities.
Right. There's a lot of evidence suggesting there's more to reality than just the material world, but we've been conditioned to ignore it. It's led to what some call ontological destabilization, where the very foundation of what we believe is being shaken.
So even if these drones turn out to have a mundane explanation, the way they're messing with our heads is part of this bigger shift in how we see the world.
Exactly. It's forcing us to confront the limits of what we thought we knew. And that can be unsettling, even if it ultimately leads to a more expansive view of reality.
This feels like a good time to remind everyone watching. If you're digging this deep dive into the drone mystery and what it all means, hit that subscribe button and share this with your friends. And stick with us because there's much more to come.
Before we get too deep into the philosophical side of things, let's bring this back to the drones themselves. One thing that really stands out to me is the way people are focusing on the image of the drone, that sleek, almost futuristic design.
You mean like how UFOs are always depicted as flying saucers?
Yeah.
Even if eyewitness accounts vary wildly.
Yeah.
Is there a connection there?
Jung would definitely say so. He was fascinated by the archetype of the circle, the mandala, which represents wholeness, the self, maybe the drone's shape, or even the idea of a swarm is tapping into something deeper in our collective psyche.
So it's not just a machine, it's become a symbol.
Right.
Like something out of a dream.
Yeah. Right. And dreams, for Jung, were a direct line to the unconscious. Perhaps these drones are acting as a kind of wake-up call, forcing us to pay attention to what our unconscious is trying to tell us.
Instead of getting hung up on whether it's aliens or the government, we should be asking what this whole thing means for us personally, how it makes us feel, what deeper truths it might be pointing to.
I think you're getting at something really important there. We often get so fixated on the literal, the physical evidence that we miss the symbolic meaning, the message behind the message.
It's like we're so used to seeing the world through a purely material lens that we've forgotten how to interpret the language of symbols, of myth, of our own dreams. And maybe these drones are a reminder that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
Absolutely. And maybe that's the key to understanding not just the phenomenon, but so much of what's happening in the world right now. It's a call to expand our awareness, to look beyond the surface, and to embrace the mystery of existence.
Okay, mind blown, where we'll delve into some personal experiences that have shaped our perspectives on this whole thing. Don't go anywhere.
We were talking about how these drones, whatever they are, seem to be tapping into something deeper, something symbolic.
It's making me think about how we deal with anything unexplained. Like, we want concrete answers, but what if those aren't always the most important ones?
Exactly. These events can be deeply personal, even destabilizing, but they also offer an opportunity for growth and transformation.
You've had some experiences that really shaped your perspective on this, right? Like your time at the Monroe Institute. Using that hemisync technology to explore consciousness.
Yeah, the Monroe Institute was a turning point for me. For those unfamiliar, hemisync uses specific sound frequencies to alter brainwave patterns, leading to different states of consciousness. During one retreat, I spent days in complete darkness, meditating. It was unnerving at first, but then I realized the darkness wasn't empty. It was full of potential, like the fertile ground from which new insights can emerge.
That's so interesting. We're taught to be afraid of the dark, but in a way, it's where we all come from. Literally and metaphorically.
It's like those ancient rituals of dream incubation, where people would sleep in caves or temples seeking visions. By removing external distractions, we create space for the unconscious to speak.
And that ties into what we were saying before about a more holistic approach to well-being. It's not just about fixing the body, but tending to the inner world, the psyche too.
Jung believed the psyche is where we find the keys to understanding our experiences, the meaning behind the events of our lives. And sometimes those keys are buried deep, requiring us to go into those dark places within ourselves.
Speaking of going deep, you've shared about a recent experience that took you to the edge of reality, involving WUMA, orange sunshine, LSD, and 5-MeO-DMT. That's some serious inner exploration.
It was intense, multi-layered. The WUMA, a psychedelic cactus, provided a gentle entry point with a warmth and empathy that opened me up. Then, the orange sunshine LSD, known for its potency, amplified everything. The visuals were vivid, but more importantly, I felt this profound interconnectedness with everything around me.
You also mentioned some intense somatic releases during that part of the journey. What was that like?
It was as if my body was remembering things I'd long forgotten, releasing trapped emotions. I was crying, shaking, reliving moments of trauma. Not just from my own life, but ancestral memories, too. It was both painful and incredibly liberating.
It's amazing how the body holds on to those things. Even when we have no conscious memory of them, we carry so much more than we realize.
It speaks to how intertwined mind, body, and spirit truly are. We're not just individuals, we're vessels for the experiences of those who came before us. Sometimes those experiences need to be felt and released in order for us to move forward.
And then came the 5-MeO-DMT, considered the most powerful psychedelic out there. What was it like combining that with the LSD and in Wuma?
It's almost impossible to describe. 5-MeO-DMT is like being launched into pure consciousness, stripped of your ego, your sense of self. It can be terrifying, but this time, because of the preparation with the other substances, it was surprisingly gentle, like being carried by a river of consciousness flowing through different dimensions.
That's fascinating. The most powerful psychedelic could feel gentle. It speaks to the importance of set and setting.
Absolutely.
And of having an experienced guide.
Absolutely. The guide created a safe and supportive space, which allowed me to surrender to the experience. And that's where the real magic happened. I had this profound rebirthing experience. Even though there were no visuals, it was purely somatic.
You felt the sensations of being in the womb, being squeezed and repositioned, leading to that incredible release of being born anew.
It was primal, visceral, like reliving the moment of our entrance into this world, but with a heightened awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. It solidified everything I've been studying, but on a deeper, embodied level.
That must have been incredibly powerful to experience those truths so directly. And it brings us back to what we were discussing earlier, the limitations of a purely materialist worldview.
We're so conditioned to believe that only what we can see and touch is real.
Right.
But experiences like this show us there's a whole universe within us waiting to be explored.
And we have tools to access those realms. Meditation, dream work, even psychedelics used responsibly.
Right.
The question is, are we brave enough to go there?
That's the challenge, isn't it? To confront our fears, our limiting beliefs, and embrace the unknown.
And maybe that's what these drones are inviting us to do, to look beyond the surface, to question our assumptions, and to open ourselves to the possibility that there's more to reality than we've been led to believe.
Perhaps they're a mirror reflecting our own anxieties and desires, a symbol of the unknown that beckons us to explore the depths of our own consciousness.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. We're going to take a quick pause to let everyone digest this, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back with part 3, where we'll dive deeper into what all this means for us moving forward. And if you're finding this conversation mind-expanding, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this with your friends. We've been on quite a journey today, from mysterious drones to deep dives into consciousness itself.
It's all connected, wouldn't you say?
It really is.
These seemingly external events often point to something much deeper within us.
It feels like we're living in a time where those deeper truths are bubbling up everywhere, whether we're ready for them or not. So how do we navigate this? How do we make sense of it all?
Well, it comes back to cultivating that inner compass we were talking about.
Right.
A connection to our intuition, to that deeper knowing that resides within each of us. And that often involves developing practices that help us quiet the noise of the external world and tune into our own inner wisdom.
We've talked about meditation, dream work, spending time in nature. Are there other things people can do to strengthen that connection?
Anything that encourages introspection and self-reflection can be helpful. Journaling can be a powerful tool, allowing us to process our thoughts and emotions. Engaging in creative pursuits, whether it's painting or writing, dancing, playing music, can help us tap into our unconscious and express what's bubbling up from within.
You mentioned earlier the importance of having a mythological grammar to interpret these experiences. I think that might be a new concept for some of our viewers. Could you break that down a bit?
Sure. Think of mythology as a language. The symbolic system that helps us understand the human experience. It's full of archetypes, recurring patterns, and characters that represent universal truths about life, death, love, loss, the battle between good and evil. These stories have been passed down through generations for a reason. They contain deep wisdom and offer a framework for understanding our own journey.
So it's not about taking those myths literally, but rather seeing them as metaphors that can help us make sense of our own lives.
Exactly. When we encounter something inexplicable, like these drones, our minds naturally try to fit it into a familiar narrative. Having a strong grasp of mythology can help us see beyond the surface, to recognize the deeper symbolic meaning behind these events.
It's like learning to read the language of dreams, of synchronicities, of those moments where the universe seems to be trying to tell us something.
Precisely. It's about cultivating the ability to see the world through a more symbolic lens. Recognizing that there's often more to reality than meets the eye.
You know, it's fascinating that these drone sightings seem to be concentrated in certain parts of the world, particularly the United States and Australia. What do you make of that?
It's an intriguing observation. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that the West, in general, has become increasingly secularized. We've moved away from traditional religious structures that once provided a framework for understanding the mysterium tremendum, the awe-inspiring mystery of existence.
So in cultures with strong spiritual traditions, those kinds of unexplained experiences might be more readily integrated into their existing belief systems.
Exactly. They have a language and a set of rituals for processing those encounters. But in a society that's become increasingly materialistic and focused on the rational, those experiences can be much more disruptive.
It's like we're craving that connection to something greater than ourselves.
Right.
But we've lost the tools to make sense of it.
And in the absence of those traditional containers, those experiences often erupt in unexpected ways through UFO sightings, paranormal phenomena, or even the emergence of new spiritual movements that attempt to provide a framework for understanding these mysteries.
It's a wild time to be alive, that's for sure. But it can also be pretty overwhelming. How do we find our footing in all of this?
Yeah.
How do we avoid getting swept away by the chaos and uncertainty?
It all comes back to that inner compass, to cultivating a strong connection to our own inner knowing, to our dharma, our purpose. When we're rooted in that sense of purpose, we have a guiding principle that helps us navigate the complexities of life.
It's about finding that still point within ourselves, that place of peace and clarity amidst a storm.
Exactly. And that's where those practices we talked about, meditation, dream work, spending time in nature, become so valuable.
Yeah.
They help us to quiet the mind, to connect with that deeper wisdom within, and to find our way back to ourselves when we feel lost.
You've also talked about the dangers of creative constipation.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
I see this a lot, especially among people who are deeply engaged in exploring these big topics of consciousness, spirituality, and the paranormal. They consume vast amounts of information. They attend workshops. They read books. They listen to podcasts, but they don't have an outlet for all of that input.
So it's not just about taking in information. It's about doing something with it, expressing it in some way.
Precisely. We need to find ways to alchemize those experiences, to transform them into something meaningful and creative.
Yeah.
Whether it's through writing, art, music, or any other form of self-expression, we need to find ways to process all that we're taking in and give it back to the world in a new form.
I love that analogy of alchemy.
Yeah.
It's about taking something raw and transforming it into something beautiful and valuable.
And it's not always a pretty process.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's messy and chaotic, but it's through that process of creation that we discover our unique voice, our contribution to the world.
And maybe that's the ultimate message behind all of this, whether it's the drone phenomenon or any of the other strange things happening in the world right now. It's a call to wake up, to question everything, and to find our own unique way of expressing the truth that we're discovering within ourselves.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
It's a call to embrace the mystery, to dive deep into the unknown, and to emerge transformed.
This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone watching, if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the quantum soul, be sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends. We have 2 more amazing videos on the screen right now. Click on one to continue your journey.